if you look at the Indian middle class, they will do whatever it takes to educate their kids.
We've all been told saying the West is a place that you need to be at,
Yeah.
that you need to study at the fancy universities, then you need to get a job out there, and that is the ideal way to go about life.
What you're exposed to in an average institution or above average institution in the West, as of now, is still of a higher quality than what you can get here.
यदि धंधा भारत में चलाना है तो आपको भारत की संस्कृति सीखनी पड़ेगी.
We keep talking about the ROI of a foreign education, right? And often we look at it from a financial lens. You know, today if you go to a Boston or even the UK, it's like 80 lakhs to a crore a year.
Every 100 students that are going abroad, 33 of them are taking loans in some form or the other.
Having gone through a 3-year degree here, a BSc in economics, Calcutta University, many laureates have come out of that system. But the fact is, it was by rote. It was about passing exams. It was not about critical thinking.
There are a lot of people who still want to do their MBA overseas. They still yearn for that experience overseas. You're with peers who are from around the world and you can't really put a price on that.
Can you do a Google internship overseas and then instead of doing it out here, and will that not give you the same cosmopolitan upbringing / college?
If you want to work for Google or you want to work for one of the FANGs, then you have opportunities here because you've got their big campuses. But if you want to be running those companies, you want to be there.
To run a Google, you don't need to be in America. You can create the next Google in India.
So the try be heading Google if he hadn't gone overseas to study. Hi guys, welcome to the Plush Podcast.
Hi there.
It's great to have you here. And I'm really excited about this topic because it's close to my heart. And I'm sure there's plenty that you guys have to say on this as well. But before we start, why don't you guys first introduce yourselves?
Should I go first?
Go first.
This is always first.
You think? Okay. Sonal Agrawal, I, in a sense, would not be here without a foreign education because my parents met on a bus in England. One was from East Africa, one was from a village in Bihar. So anyway, today I'm a headhunter or in executive search. While I work largely in the C-suite, I have a reasonably long view of jobs and recruiting in India over 30 years. And my exposure to foreign education, of course, was that I did my MBA in London with a stint in the US as well, in the University of Michigan and London Business School.
Interesting. Mine's not as impressive, yeah.
You're very impressive. You're one of the most impressive young guys around.
But I'll try. 15 years ago, we started a youth-run non-profit organization called I.I.M.U.N. We work with now 150,000 schools across the world in about 200 cities across the world, where essentially we try to create conscientious young citizens who understand the world, but also understand India. So I've had the good fortune of seeing a lot of people go overseas, study abroad, and then come back, my sister included. But she chose to stay abroad. So there's something in common, but there's also some other perspective that perhaps I'll be able to lend.
Sure. And just to let you guys know, this is the first time I'm doing a roundtable of sorts. It's always been a one-on-one interview. And instead of just making it a Q&A kind of format or me just moderating it, I want this to be a very open and frank discussion, between us. If you look at the Indian middle class or upper middle class, parents especially, right? They will do whatever it takes to educate their kids and they'll do the best they can. They'll go through financial hardships themselves if they have to, but they want to give their kid a better education. Now, an education overseas was a ticket to a better life. Used to be, at least. Arguably, it still is. But given the current scenario, geopolitics, depreciating rupee, and there's so many other factors which we'll get into as well, things could have changed, right? So now let's start with you.
So I like the fact that you put the context around it first because the world has changed and I've seen it over 30 years. If you had come to me 30 years ago in the pre-liberalization, as it were, to say, hey, what should I do with my life as a young kid? I would have said, go West, young man, because as you said, that was your ticket.
Yeah.
Today, the opportunity here has changed.
Yes.
The country has changed. The quality of education is changing. It's not anywhere near where we want it to be. And I think the surge of globalization that happened in the last 30 years is certainly reversed or is under pressure today.
Right.
So the geopolitics of visas, of jobs, of careers, etc., has changed. The other big change is, of course, the context of AI and the internet and the
Right.
fact that you can get a lot of life experiences and do jobs sitting in your home country, no matter where that is. So it's changed. The context has changed, and the answers have changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rishabh,
Mm.
I studied in the US. I did
Mm.
my undergrad in the US.
Mm.
And even today, many years later, I still wonder, was it the degree or was it just the fact that I was 18 and living overseas and making decisions on my own and doing a lot of things on my own?
Mm.
What changed me? Was it the degree or just that life experience? And you've had your own life experiences and you can talk about that.
No, I think it's like you said, every person has a different experience per se, and their life choices are different. But I think we've all been sold, especially as a person growing up in the 90s, we've been born and brought up in an urban precinct of South Mumbai, and a lot of your viewers, like you told me, are upper middle class and above in that social economic demographic. Um, we've all been told saying the West is a place that you need to be at, that you need to study at the fancy universities, then you need to get a job out there, and that is the ideal way to go about life. But the reality of the situation today, just like Sonal mentioned, is very different. The salary out here, say for example, if you earn 100 rupees here, it's equal to 400 out there. The kind of loans that students are taking, for every 100 students that are going abroad, 33 of them are taking loans in some form or the other. Now, the thing is that when you're taking so much of a loan and you're told saying that the only way that you can be successful in life is by going abroad and studying abroad, then I think that one size fits all solution is not something that is something that we should sell to the entire country as the American dream. I think America's time is far over.
You think so?
It is, I agree that when the US sneezes, the world catches a cold. There's no question about it, and it will remain for the next couple of decades for sure. But the capitals of the world are changing. They're moving east now. Investments are coming to India, to China, to Singapore. So the world is looking at these countries, and it is about time that we started rediscovering Bharat and India per se. That's essentially what we do at the organization as well. But the only problem is that in school, we're always taught to look at the West. We're taught Shakespeare, we're taught Tolstoy, we're taught Dostoevsky, we're never taught Kalidas. So my thing is that perhaps a little more emphasis on Nalanda and a little less emphasis on Harvard would perhaps be able to be the best way. And as our Prime Minister says, and one of the things that I admire about him is he said that you don't need Harvard, you need hard work to be successful in life. And that's the Indian dream that needs to now be told to the next generation per se.
Right. But I think Indian parents would want a Harvard if they had the choice. But since you're talking about Nalanda and universities in India, let me place some numbers in front of you. ISB is now ranked 12th in the world in the latest Financial Times MBA rankings 2026. It's tied with Nanyang in Singapore. It's above Cornell. It's above Duke and above Yale, right? I.I.M. Ahmedabad is in the top, 25, global 25. Now, if Indian institutions are genuinely world class, and I know these are few and far between, why are 1.8 million students still going abroad every year?
Let me go for that one, because they don't get into the best Indian institution because the competition here is fierce. And the process, and I can't speak for ISB, but I certainly know about engineering or the good old I.I.M. system, is so number driven, it's so exam driven, just to get yourself into that 99.6 cutoff that Delhi University has, that most people with a more rounded education or interest are not even going to qualify for the league table.
Right.
They're not going to get a chance in.
Right.
So in a sense, I went to London Business School because I didn't get into I.I.M. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Right. So it's basically you need at least 10 ISBs, and
for sure.
We have either like the top tier rung, and then there's like this huge vacuum in the middle, which is not going to give you the ROI that you're looking for in terms of
it's not going to give you the experience that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Correct. And also just to add a little more perspective to this, of course, our institutions are doing fairly well and the IIMs of the world and the ISBs are doing well. But at the end of the day, even in these institutions, you yet got a very Western anglicized mindset. I'll give you an example. In an IIM Ahmedabad, the place where you are essentially graduating, that space is called Harvard Steps. Now, I'm not one for changing names for no reason, but at the end of the day, if you're going to put the final pedestal where a child is going to stand and is going to say that, this is where I'm going to collect my degree, that is also a Harvard step. So an I.I.M. Ahmedabad is also leading to an HBS. Like you rightly said, that if an Indian parent could yet get an education at HBS, you will go and take that education irrespective of whatever it is. The problem with, however, HBS is this, in that a lot of the students who work at I.I.M.U.N, it's run by 15 to 22-year-olds. After they finish, they do different things in their life. But whilst they're at the organization, many of them aspire to go to HBS and all these schools. Some have gone. The 2024 cohort that passed out, 23 or 24% of them did not get jobs at the end of 3 months. Now, if you come from some kind of affluence and privilege, that is fine. But it boils down to this, that, if, like you rightly said, that if we are being sold that same thing, there are 6.3 lakh students who went abroad last year, school and college and post-graduation. You've got 12 lakh people who are studying abroad currently. And if you include school students, it's about 19 lakh people who are studying overseas right now.
So I have my numbers wrong, or
No.
was it correct? Yeah.
Perhaps
1.8 million, so that's about 18 lakhs,
fair.
more or less.
19
is
lakh
exactly
people
that,
are
yeah.
going abroad, and in this we spent 6.3 trillion INR in terms of your tuition fee plus your accommodation and so on and so forth. So my thing is that if you are all going to go to LBS, and there's nothing wrong in an LBS and a Harvard and so on and so forth, and the quality of education out there is nice, the problem is that there is also capital flight that is taking place, and that we are spending almost 2% of our GDP, it's going abroad. And that essentially is not something that I think is the best thing for the country also. And some of these institutions that you mentioned, some of the rankings that you're mentioning, of course, if you go to see some of the QS rankings and globally accepted rankings that are there, in that Indian universities don't finish in the top 100. And that is also another conversation that needs to be had, because research is not given as much of importance in Indian universities. You have so many tenured professors in your LBSs and LSCs, and when they run out of chief guests, they call cheap guests, such as myself. So when I've gone there and spoken at some of these places, including at Oxford and places like that, and when I've met the professors out there, it's a very different mindset from what we have in Indian universities. Plus, these universities, like Sonal rightly said, are very few in nature. And I think it's only under the last administration from 2014 to 2026 that we've essentially had a growth spurt of IIMs and IITs taking place. Of course, the idea of IIMs and IITs came from Prime Minister Nehru and then thereafter. But the idea is that emphasis on education in our country is not, we don't prioritize education, is what I personally feel. That it's
Actually, going to jump in and say I disagree with that. We prioritize education. I think the options in terms of the kind of education we had available to us, and again, I'm taking a long lens, was quite different from what it is today. And I'll give you two examples, not quite in the middle class spectrum, but if you are my cook's son, right? And this is perhaps not the audience we're targeting in terms of a foreign education, but the priority on education for him is that's all he's been told. I have to do an education and then I will get a job. A degree. Unfortunately, the kind of degree that he's done, he's not employable. He's got a loan. He's done some ridiculous fly-by-night sort of thing, and he's still not employable. He would have been much better off if there was an organized apprentice system to get him into a real skill or into a real job going forward. Then I'm going to jump into my favorite example, which is Gopal from Bhopal. This is a legendary character from a book in the early 90s about young Gopal who went off from the Paris of Madhya Pradesh, Bhopal, and went off to study in a rural university in the US. And his experience is a Raj Kutrapalli of his days. And the ROI or the choices or the context that he had, both in terms of the cost or the opportunity cost or the cost relative to your family income or what you can afford, as well as his ticket to a better life was completely different. And for Gopal, from Gopal, that might still be the case in terms of the access to opportunity which he might have here. Now we can define whether that opportunity needs, is Bharat or whether it's India, or I mean, at the end of the day, we're having this conversation in English, right? We're we're contextualizing everything, or success or what have you, in a global construct that has been set up across time. It's everybody's still looking for a better life.
Yeah.
Sure, but just to come in terms of what you mentioned about the first part, where you said that we prioritize education. What I was trying to indicate is the government does not prioritize education.
For sure, yeah.
That is a worrying factor, because since 68, that is the first education policy, we changed NEP to NPE. Now, we changed NPE to NEP, but the issue with NEP is, and the issue with NPE was, that 6% of our GDP was supposed to be allocated to education. We have not allocated.
So, for the audience,
NPE was the National Policy on Education that was made in 1968. We revised it in 1986. The same policy then got revised in 2020 and became NPE became NEP, that is National Education Policy. Now, an NEP in 2020 also said the same thing what we said in 68, saying 6% आपका GDP का आप यदि education को नहीं दोगे तो आप कभी विकसित नहीं बनोगे. So the idea essentially was that give 6% of your budget to education. No government from 68 to 2026 has given 6%. In fact, the highest, which is in the recent past, which is 4.1 or 4.2%. Out of that also, we return 50% of the money back, saying we don't know where to spend it. So I think one of the gremlins of our country essentially is this: that we don't give enough importance to education per se. But and just to quickly come on the second part, chip in on the second part of it, where you said English definitely is the lingua franca of the world. There's no problem in accepting that the British left one thing positive, which was English, and English has been to our advantage. But the problem in English being to our advantage is this: that education in India makes English the medium of instruction, thereby at the cost of other languages per se. Sanskrit, which is supposed to be, or Tamil, which is supposed to be languages which are languages of the soil, are essentially not given as much importance. Because this is going to an urban elite audience, and I speak when I go to the IBO, that is your international baccalaureate schools, at that juncture, the second language choice is a foreign language, also as much as an Indian language that is there, and we have only focused on the West. So I do know where you spoke about globalization leading to fervent nationalization and the right-wing fundamentalism of today. But I'm a firm believer that there's a middle path where you've got India and you've got international, and you need to understand the best of India and international, and that's what's written in our Shastras.
I wanted to just jump in. We keep talking about the ROI of a foreign education, right? And often we look at it from a financial lens. Okay, I've spent, today if you go to a Boston or even the UK, it's like 80 lakhs to a crore a year. For your undergrad, that's about 4 crores a year, right?
Correct.
Flights, back and forth, parents coming for your graduation. It's a lot of money. You will take a spring break holiday. So for someone who's going there just for their undergrad, my view is that it's a 4-year party. Now, there's a caveat there.
Correct.
If you're doing a business degree, I think it can be a 4-year party. Perhaps for engineering or computer science, it's a little bit more rigorous. It's a little bit more than just that. But if you're going to come back to India, then it doesn't really matter, right? You don't have the stress of getting a job, applying for a job, which a lot of people, at least from the privileged backgrounds, at least do. They go overseas, they get a 4-year degree, chapa mil jata hai. So in a way, it's a luxury brand that you're buying into, right? As Scott Galloway, the former professor at NYU Stern School of Business, said that all these top tier universities in the US, they take pride in turning away 90% of the people, right? So they say our acceptance rate is 5%, 7%, whatever. That's a luxury brand, right? They're not really uplifting society. Now, he's talking about it from an American lens, but something similar is happening here with some of these elite institutions as well, right? It's an Hermes bag. It's a luxury brand that very few can afford.
But the idea is that essentially, if you want to buy a Richard Mille or you want to buy a Vasher or Constantine, and then you want to work in India, is it actually adding any value proposition per se? Because in education also, you are putting your Harvards and your Stanfords out there. You're putting a stamp on it. and then you're coming back to India, and then you have to practice in Indore and in Mao, or you have to go to the Northeast and you have to set up a factory out there. So the thing is that the principles of management that you are learning in the West, like you rightly said, it's a 4-year party. After the 4-year party, then you come back to India and then you are trying to do something. So it's great in that sense that you are adding to your prestige value, you are adding a Rolex to your collection or your AP to a collection, and it's very nice in that sense. But the idea is whether at the end of the day, that is going to actually translate into something real on ground. Rather, perhaps an alternative way to look at this is even for privileged families. Why don't you send your children for exchange programs? ISEX does beautiful exchange programs. I.I.M.U.N, in its own small way, does study tours overseas. There are so many options. There are internships that they can take. You have real experience that you gain overseas, and you study in a university out here. You don't really need to pay that kind of money. And I know that wealth is not as material beyond the point for people who are privileged. But at the end of the day, even a few crores that are saved, that can be invested in a better way, not in terms of investments, but investment on the individual per se as well. So I don't particularly feel.
Yeah, no, and I can't disagree with that, but I am going to say that even politicians and across all parties who are serving the country and building the nation are still sending their kids overseas.
Agreed.
And I will not even comment about what watches they're wearing. But the fact is that, look, all of this is fine. But I'm going to pick up something else that you said, that it's a 4-year party. It can be. It depends on where you're at and what you want to do. I think apart from the actual structure of what you study, and the fact is that you are exposed, notwithstanding the premium institutions here or some of the better structured institutions here, but what you're exposed to in an average institution or above average institution in the West, as of now, is still of a higher quality than what you can get here.
Yeah.
You can, apart from your core degree, whatever it might happen to be in, and we can argue about whether liberal arts is more important or STEM is more important or, deep research is more important. That depends on who you are and what you want to do. You have an opportunity to get a set of life experiences around your core education or the degree that you're doing, which is much beyond what you can do here. Now, they might be essentially Western experiences. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with South Bombay kids who've never been on the train.
Yeah.
That's a different issue. And the issue of not seeing what is in front of your nose or not being able to see your privilege is not a India versus the West issue. It is your lens and your upbringing and how you are looking at it. So,
no, I agree.
And I will say that people get if you break up your question, which you started with in terms of ROI, it's not just or in terms of what is an education. Part of your life experiences that you gain from going into rural India or doing your bit in Indore or what have you, and part of it is seeing life experiences. It could be improv club, it could be travel to different countries. You both have talked quite a lot while we were sitting here and chatting about the different things that you've done in different countries that has shaped you.
I'll agree with you there. One of the things I felt that a foreign education offered me, I felt 90% of my learning was outside class. I could, I had a 1-credit Taekwondo class. Now, this is 20 odd years ago. There's a golf class as well. There could be, I went overseas at a time when it was science, commerce, arts here. And yeah, I'm sure it's changed, but, there was so much more. And also you're making a lot of micro decisions from what class to take, whether you want to take an 8 a.m. class, doing your own laundry, cooking, who's going to be your roommate.
Correct.
A million decisions on your own. You could get a campus job as well. Now, when I came back, I found that the kids here did not have the same experience. They were probably more relevant to the Indian corporate ecosystem, but they didn't have these experiences, right? And I felt that somewhere gave me an edge, not in terms of getting a job, because I was actually a distant as far as that is concerned, but I had a different worldview.
There's no question.
And a lot of, my worldview has been shaped a lot by my education overseas. So I can't put a price tag on that. So in that sense, an ROI what is ROI? And
I mean,
ROI
the
could be different for different people.
the politician part is coming in. And,
Yeah.
just adding to that part before I miss that thought, I
Yeah.
completely concur that the politicians all send their children overseas. Now, whether you look at, and for me, there's no problem because one is not seeking a ticket, though the students who work at I.I.M.U.N eventually seek a ticket. So whether it be Nirmala Sitharaman's daughter, whether it be Jaishankarji's son, whether it's Kamal Nath's son, whether it is P. Chidambaram's son, and some of these people I know as well, all of them have been sent abroad in order to study, and then they come back to the country. So obviously they are also seeing some value proposition in going abroad. There's no question about it. But
There's Sachin Pilot, there's Jyoti Aditya Scindia. All these
Correct.
guys have also studied abroad.
correct, there's no doubt that 25 years ago that education abroad was very different from what it is today. Today, with the advent of AI, and this is something that I would like to say, where you've got ChatGPT and you've got Claude and you've got all of these softwares out here, if you really want to learn and if you are interested in learning, then I think the academic weightage that some of these universities claim to have, that we teach better, or we have better professors, that will get diminished over a period of time because accessibility has improved. Like, we've started a small series at the organization where we get Nobel laureates to come to India and to talk to children. Now the thing is that, and these children are from tier 3, tier 4 cities as well, and they ask probing questions. Now a Nobel laureate normally is not accessible to the Indian public at large, but when they come and talk about their issues, in whether they won physics or whatever it is, the kids out here just need access. Once they get the access to it and they get the understanding saying, acha, iska uttar Claude pe milega, then I think that it's going to be a game changer for Indians overall. And in that, even the ones who come from privilege, my problem is this, that we always keep telling them, saying, when you go abroad, and there's no doubt about it that my worldview has been shaped by traveling overseas as well. But at the same point in time, is it, I don't think, at least in my opinion, that a 4-year party is something that you should have. And skills such as making your own bed or traveling, or cooking for yourself, etc., can also be taught in Indian households only if the ladla beta or beti is essentially made to work harder. So the only thing is that if the mindset changes in India, perhaps children out here will get a better upbringing if you are not sent for 4 years out there where everything else apart from education also happens. And I'm sure we've had friends and we've traveled enough in order to realize that when you are in a environment which is a familial environment, and that's the other thing that I want to perhaps touch upon, is India is yet a family oriented environment.
Yeah.
The West is a very individualistic society.
Yes.
The individualistic society has its own benefits, and that is very important today. To live independently, to do things independently, is very important in life. But at the end of the day, that leads to also all sorts of problems, mental health issues, etc., depression, and slew of other problems that a child would face, especially at a tender age of 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, in comparison to having that person in and around, in an environment where it is semi-protective in nature, where you can access that person and you can help shape that person's environment. If you're just going to throw them out in the sea as the Americans do at 16, saying go fend for themselves, then I don't know whether that's the best approach in order to build a person, especially a person who for the first 16 years has lived a very comfortable South Bombay life.
Well, and I don't disagree with any of that. But I think if I come back to the fact that we're debating a foreign education or the ROI on that versus getting an education in India, and this is a much more holistic conversation that you're going into in terms of self-awareness and about concept of how you live life. But if I bring it back down to that, the choices or the algorithm that people use depends on where they are in their lives. The algorithm for the very rich is very different, and they're certainly not listening to anything that we are saying. We can't weigh in on that. The option or the ticket to a better life, which is where you really start from, and the better life could be defined as the job. It could be life experiences. It could be just access to an opportunity that you may not have if you're in a certain socioeconomic strata here or whatever it is. So it depends on what you want. If you want to work for Google or you want to work for one of the FANGs, then you have opportunities here because you've got their big campuses here, which has changed from where it was 30 years ago. But if you want to be running those companies, you want to be there.
And Agrawal, disagree in this small part. I'll tell you why. Because to run the company, definitely it's very advantageous to have a Sundar Pichai there and a Priyanka Chopra there. It's very nice, and I feel very proud as an Indian, as a person, that these people have gone. But at the same point in time, it is very important to also state that to run a Google, you don't need to be in America. You can create the next Google in India.
Yeah, but
And
would
therefore,
Sundar Pichai be heading Google if he hadn't gone overseas to study?
there is no Google in India. That is the problem. And therefore, we have to create a Google in India. And that is where essentially entrepreneurship needs a boost. That is where startup culture in our country needs a boost. And that's the India story that we want to tell the top 10% of our country. We want to tell the Akhileshis who's listening out here, saying, look, the opportunity essentially lies in a place where 900 million people are below the age of 35, where Mr. Pichai, in terms of his maximum trips overseas, has made it to India, not in terms of personal visit, but in terms of the fact that his biggest market is India. तो आपको भारत में बेचना है, भारत को की यूथ को बेचना है, तो एंड यदि आपके पास दिमाग है, and rather than becoming a CEO, which I duly respect, that you should, why not become the chairman, why not become Sergey Brin, and why not start the Googles of the world? Because it's about time that India's growth story begins. I'm sorry, I'm very passionate about this, and very
evidently,
yeah. And yeah, please, sorry.
Sorry, I'm just going to come back to the fact that this is a good conversation to have with Akhilesh ji or many of the other people who frame and shape that policy.
No, Akhilesh is a 22-year-old boy.
Yeah. Sorry, he's talking about politicians or people who help create ecosystems, etc. And this is an important conversation to have.
No, it's an important conversation for a 17-year-old also.
Does it? Like I said, when a 17-year-old is making this choice,
of course,
he can afford to somehow go overseas. He can afford.
Why should he go overseas?
At the moment, it's not about going overseas. It's about getting the best educational experience that you can get.
Yes.
That may well be overseas, and I don't buy necessarily the American dream. Apart from the big four of America, US, Canada, Australia, there are many other options, but that's a different
What are some of the other options?
So I think today the other options range from a number of opportunities in Asia. And even apart from Australia, New Zealand is an option. Singapore is an option. Korea has become an option. Japan is an option if you want to work in EV.
China is probably an option.
Perhaps. In Europe, you've got obviously the Netherlands, you've got Germany, you've got France, which are all destinations for Indian kids to go to.
Yeah.
And they're popular destinations. And as you're seeing, whenever there's war, that there's been kids in the Ukraine, there are kids in Iran, there's kids everywhere. Why are people going is because of the lack of opportunity to get an education here necessarily.
That's because we're glorifying. Again, that's what I'm saying. We're glorifying. The thing is that I'm not saying that if you want a super specialization, I'll also correct myself. Suppose you want something in, say, neuroscience, and it does not exist in India, then of course you have to go overseas in order to study. But otherwise, what is happening is we are glorifying these destinations. We are saying that Bharat mein aapko education milta hi nahi hai. And I'm not saying that there is not good quality education that is available overseas. There is good quality education that's available overseas, but there are also different types of, like I said at the outside, it's not one size fits all, which is
exactly
what
where I started with. Yeah.
And that is where I'm trying to understand that, when we say that there is good quality, there's better education available outside India in comparison to India. If your final destination, like you rightly said, if your final destination is that you're moving up a socio-economic ladder, or is it happiness? And therefore, the larger context of it is very important. That if you are chasing happiness, and if there is a person who's watching this who comes from privilege, who says that my life aim, because I'm coming from privilege, so I have this much money, I have so and so, etc., etc. My aim is in order to be happy. So then is a 4-year.
It could be a 2-year MBA program. It could be a 1-year MBA program that you have at an INSEAD as well. So it's not just about 4 years. I want to go beyond your undergrad degree. There are a lot of people who still want to do their MBA overseas. Now, that could be someone who's been to, has finished their undergrad or graduation here. They probably worked for a few years. They have a fair idea about what they want. But, they still yearn for that experience overseas, an international overview and an outlook, which 100%. Is also important.
100%.
Those who live here versus go overseas. I do agree that there's a certain polish and there's a certain finesse, which is also important in the softer skills. I'm not saying you can't get that here, but that gives you, you're with peers who are from around the world, and you can't really put a price on that.
Can that experience be substituted by a 10-day program / 2-month internship that is any which way offered pro bono, or you pay for it, or you find your way to a, you do a Google internship overseas, and then instead of doing it out here. And will that not give you the same cosmopolitan upbringing / polish / whatever it is?
I was going to get to that.
Right.
As someone who's hosted a travel show,
Right.
another option here would be, okay, if your parents can't afford that ridiculous 1 crore a year kind of fee, or whatever that number is, give or take, maybe send your kids backpacking to South America, to Europe, to Southeast Asia, 3 or 4 of those, go live in hostels, couch surfing and all of that.
Or even if you can
meet
afford.
people from around the world. And, you get to cook your own meals in a hostel. So if you're looking for that kind of experience where you meet people from around the world, you cook your own meals, you can do that just by backpacking across the world.
I concur. But
Yeah.
in this, what I would just like to say is that even if you have the 1 crore,
Yeah.
is it beneficial in order to study a MBA in HBS or in a London Business School today? In my opinion, it is better, in my opinion, and maybe different for different people. It may be better in order to go backpacking in South America. I went to Chile recently, to Santiago. So for all the India that I speak about, the only thing is that it is very important to get this global exposure.
Yeah.
I'm not denying that, but I'm saying that even if you have the 1 crore,
Yeah.
am I looking to do a PhD or an MBA program from a university, or am I investing it in experiences that are going to enrich me? Today you speak the way that you speak, of course, because of your college per se, but also because of the travel that you've gone.
Absolutely. You have to build on top of that
I'm
education.
going to say that it's not an either or, right? And
It's not a zero-sum game.
it's not a zero-sum game. The fact is that if you study here, if you study there, if you don't have well-rounded experiences, your worldview or what you bring to the table is going to be limited.
Of course.
Those experiences could be rural immersion programs that are in India. It could be backpacking in Chile. It could be anything that you choose for it to be. The core education part of it, which I come back to, is having gone through a 3-year degree here.
Right.
A BSc in economics, Calcutta University, all of the many laureates have come out of that system, blah, blah. But the fact is, it was by rote. It was about passing exams. It was not about critical thinking.
And a lot of that probably hasn't changed yet.
I would imagine
It hasn't.
It has not.
It hasn't.
So when you are looking at this education opportunity in elsewhere, to your fact, we don't have it yet.
Of course,
and
correct.
If you are in an environment in the university or whatever, in wherever, to be able to shape your thinking, or to be able to have, in a STEM degree, for example, you're supposed to be working at an intersection of science, technology, mathematics, etc., and it's supposed to be teaching you how these things work together rather than individual streams of things that you're learning. Now, when you don't have the opportunity here...
But you have now. That's what I'm saying. Now the interdisciplinary subjects are becoming a part through the NEP. Like today was the first batch, the first cohort from NEP passed out in this year. Now you've got interdisciplinary studies that are possible. So I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. Education in India is changing. It's not fast changing.
It is changing.
It's not changing as much as we want it to change.
There's a lot of international universities that are also coming to India. So I believe there's an Illinois Institute of Technology that's coming to Vikhroli.
Correct.
In Mumbai. So you've got IIT Powai and IIT Vikhroli now, in a sense. You also have the University of Western Australia and BKC. And there's a University of York that is coming as well. Every other day, I keep seeing a front page ad of some university that's coming. Now, how good those universities are, I don't know. How good the faculty is, I don't know. But you do have an NYU in Abu Dhabi as well.
Correct.
And a few other universities that are closer to home, perhaps in the GCC, right?
Correct.
So perhaps, and I know people who've not been able to, for whatever reason, afford to send their kids to an NYU for 4 years in their undergrad, are okay to send their kids to an Abu Dhabi for 2 years, perhaps a little later on, when they're sure what their kid wants or has a fair idea. So that could be another option. And with these guys now coming here, investing here, maybe there's an opportunity to stay here as well and get that degree per se.
Correct.
And then go backpacking
But
to
I don't know
South
whether these
America for a international experience.
But I don't know whether these universities are any which way universities that I would advocate. What
Yeah.
happens is, like as you rightly said, the top universities of the world only can take in as many students. Majority of our students, that is more than 98, 99% of the students don't study in these top tier universities.
Yes.
Now we are bringing these other B grade, C grade, D grade universities to our country.
Yeah.
And we are saying that our children who was paying 80 lakh rupees to go abroad and study in these schools now will pay 20 lakh rupees and study in the institution out here. Now, I've been to some of these places, some of these universities that, which are not top tier institutions.
Right.
If you're not going to a top tier institution, any which way the cohort that you're getting, the kind of networking that you want to do, the kind of the advantages of studying in these universities is not there. So then my thing is that if we have to only study in the University of Liverpool, example, I'd rather study at HR college. I studied at HR college. I hope I didn't turn out as bad. But the idea essentially is that then I'd study at HR and then do an immersive learning program in South America.
Yeah.
And you said rural immersion in India is there, but also luxury immersion, Sonal, you will be happy. The Aman Bags of the world, first there was only one Aman. Now we've got so many Amans that are being set up across the country. So luxury immersion or cultural immersions in different ways are also there and available in tier 3, tier 4 cities across the country. So what I'm trying to say is perhaps not glorifying these foreign universities beyond the few which are not available in India in terms of the specific course. Like an HBS also today, I think has no value significance, or a Columbia does not have value significance in terms of a business school in comparison to finishing off from a Jahind college. And I know what happens in Jahind and I know what will happen in Columbia. The reason I'm saying this is a kid in Jahind, if they want to work hard, nothing is going to, and if they have the kind of privilege that they come from, then they can shape themselves much better because you have the academic ability to steer basis what you want to. In Colombia, you can't go and tell your professor saying, look, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't go, my sister at least could not go and tell her professors a few years earlier saying, I will not attend this 6-month semester, I may take a gap semester, and then, but I'll have to finish it. But at Jahind College, you will get your 3-year degree, even if the professors are not good, if you come from privilege and can talk to the university and say, I'm doing so and so. Can you please give me a leave? So what I'm trying to say is your world
Will
view
they
is
give you a leave here versus there? Of course, you can drop out from university.
You can drop out, but
You can
that's
drop
that
out and
we're
come
not talking
back.
about that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, I don't think Indian education systems are that flexible. We did not have the
if you come from
opportunity-
privilege, everything is flexible.
But then if you come from privilege, then it doesn't matter.
But
right?
this conversation is for privilege, right?
Well,
To a certain
no,
extent,
to
but,
the middle class who's actually making this choice.
But the middle class definitely should not make the choice of going abroad because the middle class takes a loan. My friend, the middle class is the one that is suffering. In the middle class stories that I've heard, and I'll tell you the stories. I'll tell you one quick story. A kid who took a loan could not pay the loan for 10 years. That kid then their parents had to sell their home in a small town in India
For
in
sure.
order to be able to pay that
That's
money
an
off.
outlier, but there are lots of kids whose parents they
Can
actually
afford
Out of the
they can
33
afford to.
out of the 33% who take a loan, that is 33% of the students take an education loan. The remaining take loans in different forms, which is from friends, family, this, that, etc. 33% is formal. Informal karoge, so 72% of the people who go abroad. So out of 100 children who go abroad, 72% take a loan in some form or the other. These are not my statistics. This is Niti Aayog, Government of India statistics. 72% people take a loan when they're going abroad. How many of those people are able to, if we go and we actually check, how many of those people are able to pay off those loans, how many are able to find a job out there
And
and
I'm
lead a
coming
good
back
quality of
to
life? So
my
middle
cook
class.
son, who's not middle class, but who
Who
has
probably
the same
needed to
thing.
go to a
He's
trade school.
taken a loan.
Yeah.
He can't pay it back because he can't get a job. So this problem is universal.
No, it is not. I'll tell you what the universal problem, sorry, but the universal problem here is, here you are paying a loan of 6 lakh rupees, there you are paying a loan of 60 lakh rupees, you've sold your house.
Yeah, but if it's
But
if it's your
if it's your cook, the
domestic
6
help
lakh
son,
is actually
the
a
6 lakh is the
significantly,
same as a 60
it's
lakh
actually
for-
much more.
No,
Yeah.
but the domestic health sum is, like you said, the people who are middle class, who are going to perhaps watch this kind of conversation.
I think people
That's
are
relative.
well equipped to make their own decisions about what their likely ROI is and take those calls in terms of what is my objective. If I want to live in Europe or if I want to work in a certain kind of company, this
what
is the
happens
best
is-
starting point that I can get.
What happens is a lot of Indian parents, at least, they will start saving for their kids' education today, knowing how expensive it is from the time the kid is born. Sometimes even prior to that, right? So when the kid is 18, 20, you put $10,000 in a mutual fund for the
Correct.
next, and let it
Yeah.
ride for like 18 years, 20 years, and that's your education fund. So you've got a few crores.
And
for
they're
your-
doing that in the US as well.
And they're doing that in the US.
Hmm.
Now, coming to your point, right, about your cook's son, he probably needed to go to a trade school.
Exactly.
This is a problem that's happening in the US as well.
Exactly.
There's a statistic, now I could be off by a few points, but 47% of graduates between the ages of 22 and 27 don't have a job in this era of AI and all of that. So plumbers and the HVAC guys, the trade school guys, although from a class perspective, and that exists in the US as well, and
yeah.
not perhaps not as much as India, but a plumber is always going to have a job, right? You need your tap to work, you need all this to function, but nobody's becoming a middle class guy is not aiming to become a plumber here in India, but is considering that and is considering trade school because they're making $150,000 a year, and that's a very comfortable life, fairly comfortable life. So that's a call that people need to take.
The fact
This
is,
is
I'm not
universal.
advocating to go overseas or to go to America, and I'm certainly not an America fan. My point is, you get the best education that you can afford, that you can access. And it certainly doesn't have to be the US, it could well be in India. The choices that you make are dependent on the options that you have in front of you.
What's happened now in the US as well is, I was just getting some stats as well, that F1 student visa approvals to Indians dropped by nearly 70%.
Correct.
In the summer of 2025, so about a year ago. And the H1B now costs potentially $100,000. And there are lots of students who were planning to go overseas, drop their plans because they're like, you know what, this is, I'm going to be, my parents are spending so much money.
The ROI is not going to work for them.
The ROI is not going to work if it's a financial ROI in that case, right? So there are different kinds of, the parents who would take, students who would take a loan. And then there are parents who've, saved up a lot of money and they're like, beta, ये ticket मैं आपको दे सकता हूँ और आपकी education उसके बाद में you're on your own, right? So that's that cohort as well. They're like, you know what? Once I've paid for your education, I'm done. Now you have to fend for yourself. So get a job and, your living expenses there, whatever, a little bit here and there, you have to manage on your own. So yeah, that's another thing about the US, right? So the conversation has changed over the last year.
The same kid here who won't make his bed is going and hustling and serving in the cafeterias there because A, everybody does it. B, it's acceptable to have a blue collar job to support yourself. And it's what you do. You hustle and you get there. And the same thing would happen in Germany or in Singapore, what have you, depending on, I don't know, the kids who go to Singapore.
Why can't you do that here?
The social construct here would not allow you to hustle in the same way.
Why can't a person who comes from privilege, example, from South Bombay, who's watching this, okay,
Right.
or from Pali Hill,
But he doesn't need to do the cafeteria job regardless. So
They're
that's
not
why
going to become a Swiggy driver or delivery guy here, whereas there you will have somebody from a middle class American background who's grown up, with, in a decent house, 2 cars, picket fence, and the dog, the whole American dream story in 2 cars, whose parents have 2 cars. That guy will get a job in a cafeteria. That guy will be a night monitor of sorts, or he will
or
work,
a TA or an RA or whatever.
But you all are saying that we should get that when the kids from here go abroad, at that juncture, that time, even those who come from privilege are sometimes doing these blue-collared jobs. So my question is that why can't a kid from privilege do the blue-collared job in Starbucks in Bombay?
The social construct doesn't allow that here.
And the ROI
Your peers
on
at Jai Hind College or my peers here as well, they were, my peers, again, spoiled kids, we were all going in our fancy cars.
No, you don't need to do that because your Jai Hind education is not going to cost you that
But
much.
what I'm trying to say is that is perhaps what the mindset shift that is needed in our country in comparison to, of course, because that is my main question, that what is education getting you eventually? If education is only a means to an end, and if education is supposed to lead you eventually to happiness, which is what in my mind education should eventually will give you money, then social recognition, etc., etc. And these are social evils, which is a different conversation for a different day. But I'm not saying that money is an evil as much. But what I'm trying to make you to highlight is this, that if education's purpose is in order to give you clarity and eventually give you happiness, then rather than changing, of course, we need to better the Indian education system. I've written extensively about this, about how the Indian education system needs to be better. But rather than pushing the privileged, the ones who have access, the ones who have read your French Revolution before they've read what happened perhaps in the Indian independence movement, why not get those people to open up to the understanding and to the idea that, look, utilize your formative years, your impressionable years, in order to build a holistic personality, which may not be necessarily equated to a University of Liverpool's education, or may not even be equated to an HBS, because there are many alternative streams to develop the personality or the child that is there. And there's a beautiful book by Jiddu Krishnamurti called Fear from the Unknown. All of the Western and the concepts of money, power, greed, and the way that the West has demarked what is supposed to be done utilizing that education is only incorrect, and which is why and this is something that a privileged society will understand.
What
not
you're
somebody who
essentially
is
saying is rough it out. When I was in school, roughing it out, and I went to Bombay Scottish, which at the time was considered a privileged school.
it is.
Yeah, and roughing it out then meant, going for one of these camps in Uran or Jaipur or, the south of India, and traveling by second class train. Bathrooms aren't clean, non-air conditioned rooms. Today, those camps are, skiing trips for IB schools, right? So not quite roughing it out, but I think that's what you're essentially referring to.
And also, in a way, the larger question which I keep coming back to is, what is education eventually going to give you? Because you are studying because you want something at the end of that education. So what is education exposing you to, and what is the end goal? If the purpose of education is in order to be happy, there are, like I've reiterated this many a time, that it may not necessarily be the traditional brick and mortar educational systems that we are seeing. In fact, so many people such as, Nikhil Kamath mentioned this, that is an MBA also worth it?
Right.
And there was an entire conversation about that. Or, the fact that even in America, now the brick and mortar concept is also giving way to different forms of education. So what I'm trying to say is that question is, education is your B school degree, or is your studying in University of Liverpool, because we've been dissing it.
But
actually
I'll jump
worth
in
it?
with this to say then your B school education, whether it is I.I.M. or whether it is Harvard, this question, existential question of yours would apply equally to both.
It applies a
And
little more to those going abroad in
It's-
comparison
it's-
to
and
here,
these are-
because
these are
72%
very-
take a loan. That is my problem.
it is, the fact is, the road to happiness is different for different people, right? At the end of the day, the people are looking for self-actualization, partly through their jobs, partly through their careers, certainly by making money or providing a comfortable life, levels which may differ quite a lot depending on who you want to be. It may be to invent something, it may be to start something, it may be to be a doctor, it might be to work in business, it might be to
And
join
where is
politics.
the maximum opportunity
It
for all
doesn't
of your
matter.
questions?
The point is that the question that is faced, that a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old and their parents, who are probably helping them make this decision, is faced with, is that, given my aspiration, whatever it might be, what is my best chance of achieving that?
And it's very personal to you.
And it's personal. And I'm saying, I would absolutely not advocate selling your house to go anywhere, be it I.I.M. or be it overseas or what have you.
Right.
And again, I come back to the point in terms of the best fit for you, wherever it might be, to whatever you can afford. Will you stretch more if you have to? Of course you will.
No, but where are you starting the business? My question is this. You said all of these opportunities are Indian students. This is going to Indian students. This
Yes.
is going to an Indian 17-year-old.
Yes, absolutely.
So where is the 17-year-old or the 25-year-old looking to start his business? Where is he looking to? My question is,
Traditionally,
where is he doing?
Traditionally, a lot of this has actually happened in the West because startups, in terms of a culture, in terms of being able to start something in a garage and make
Thank
something
you.
out of it,
Thank
a
you for
lot-
answering this. Because,
perfectly. That opportunity
And then when I-
now is slowly getting legitimized in India.
And where is perplexity tying up for its largest consumer base?
For sure.
So
No,
my
no,
question,
the consumer base is
So my-
addressed through various needs, and not everybody has the same level of aspiration in terms of trying to change the world.
No, I'm not saying business. I'm saying any field. You said
Yeah.
becoming a doctor or doing anything, becoming a good lawyer, whichever field you catch. For an average 17-year-old who's watching this, eventually, if you are going to come back and you're going to practice in India, my question is, in whichever form, my question is your foreign degree actually leading more to credibility in terms of a paper degree, like how people parade, and therefore I don't talk about my experience, is my brief experiences overseas, is everybody puts an HBS 7-day executive program, puts it on your CV and
For
says,
sure. Yeah.
I am, is it actually beyond the fact, beyond your Lutyens Delhi and your wine conversations, does the person on ground whom you are impacting and helping in whichever field, whether it be public service or law, or whichever field you are talking about, do they really care whether you studied at Harvard or whether you studied at Oxford? And whether
So let
that's
me, as a
going to be
recruiter,
No,
let me
I'll-
recruiter, let
okay,
me, as
yeah,
a
go
recruiter,
ahead,
let me
and I'll
answer that
jump
in a
in.
completely different way.
Yeah.
Right? It depends on what you want to be.
Hmm.
Right? If you want to be in a traditional job format, it does not involve changing the world, number one. And that's not your aspiration.
But why is job not changing the world? Why is doing a job not changing the world?
A regular job, the
Hmm.
opportunity to change the world, whether you're working
You're a
in
cog
a
in the
large
wheel.
Indian conglomerate, or whether you're working in Google, or whether you're working in XYZ, the opportunity or the desire to change the world may not be there in the average kid. Let's park that for a second.
No, this is this
As a-
premise.
as
This
a-
premise. I
Well,
don't agree to.
let her finish. Let her
Ah,
finish.
I'll-
Yeah.
the what people look at in terms of the education degree, and we look at enough of that, what an Indian elite premium education offers you is a head start.
Yeah.
What a premium education in the US or elsewhere offers you is a head start. This impacts your first job, traditional job that you get. If you're anyway going to go and start a company or do something totally different, it frankly doesn't make a difference where you did. A lot of people have dropped out.
I want to ask you as a
college to do
headhunter.
that.
I want to ask you as a headhunter. Sorry to chime in. You've looked at a million resumes. You've interviewed perhaps a million of these guys. Is there a difference between a person? What difference do you see between a person who's studied overseas and come back versus someone who's studied here? Are you seeing a visible difference? A, and B, does it really matter at the end of the day if you're trying to get a job? And when does it stop mattering, rather?
I'll
That's a
tell
better
you.
question.
I know that's a very valid question. It matters the most when you're starting out. In 10 years, it doesn't matter at all where you went to school,
Okay.
because it matters what you've done or what you've done with it. The life experiences that we keep talking about are equally relevant from a rural India or taking the train in Bombay as it is to backpacking in Chile. All of that is important, and any of us are not going to get all the experiences that we would ideally want to have, right? We are not going to learn core skills of how to do a surgical operation by backpacking in Chile. So it really does depend on the context,
Yes.
right? We're not going to learn how to balance books. You're going to learn how to navigate life over and above your core, whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I will say that I work at the sea level, so I'm not seeing as many young kids as I would have when I started out, but a lot of my friends' kids, all of that stuff, the usual bits. Aspirationally, not everybody is looking at changing the world. They're looking at having their definition of happiness is not Viksit Bharat or Viksit US or Viksit anything else. It is about picket fences, house, car, child, what have you.
Yeah.
Go for
The
it.
American dream, and that's, I guess, the Indian dream on steroids.
And then I'm saying this exists. What you're describing absolutely exists. But it is not necessarily the dream for everybody.
The two things that you all spoke about. One is in terms of where you got a degree that matters when you want to apply for a job. You are a headhunter, so you know more. But forgive me if I'm wrong in terms of stating that all Indian multinationals are putting many Indian multinationals, and not say all, many Indian multinationals are putting more weightage on the person's resume and experience, and not what essentially is that you finished out of Jahind or you finished out of Columbia. In fact, if I may, the people who are finishing out of the Columbias of the world are not getting jobs as per what they would prefer getting per se. And just to finish this school of thought, and so that is one part of it, wherein I'm saying that it is not your school education that is defining what job you're getting. It is also at the amount of opportunities that you have in terms of your life experiences and how you've been shaped. And the second thing that you all mentioned.
Before you talk about the second, I'll agree with you here. When I finished business school undergrad, granted, in the US, at the time, the case studies that we were studying at, in university there were more America focused, right? So when I came back to India, I was a bit, fish out of the water, where I couldn't relate to a lot of what was going on in corporate India, and I found it hard. Whereas here in B school, people were probably studying, Amul, Zomato, UPI. Today, they're probably studying Amul, Zomato, UPI disruption.
Correct.
The idea of jugaad, which exists, in India, and that was more, that's a $80,000 per capita GDP, give or take a few. We're $2,500, $3,000 per capita GDP. So the problems are different. So the case studies are very different, and that framework didn't quite apply here. Now, it's probably changed today.
Then
The
point is that the country has changed.
Yes.
The conversations here have changed.
Yeah.
The aspiration of people just in terms of, what fridge they want, what air conditioning they want, what watch they want to wear, etc., has changed. And because of the growth of the Indian economy, largely since liberalization, the opportunity for people has changed completely. Because of the internet, the opportunity to outsource and the whole GCC and all that,
even the UC Berkeley.
and the addressable market that we talked about earlier is because the consumption capability of the country is changing rapidly.
Right.
Just one thing quickly.
Go for it.
What you mentioned, that a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old or person who's graduating is looking for their fences and is looking in order to figure life out, per se. I may be wrong again, but I predominantly work only with young people.
Yep.
And the last 15 years have gone in doing the same. I don't see a 19-year-old who's not utopian. I don't see a pessimist in a 22-year-old. I don't see a person who doesn't want to change the world in a 25-year-old. And I don't see a young member of parliament who's come out from the system or who's a young actor who's saying, look, I'm only looking for myself. If they are people who come from some privilege, and I'm not talking about people who come from a lot of privilege, but somebody who's even upper middle class or middle class, even they want to change the world and make a better world. Their worldviews might be different. They might be right-leaning or left-leaning. Their economics might be different. But I do believe, and I'm a believer, that there's a reason, ma'am, that revolutions only take place because of the young. There's a reason that Balain Shah took over as Prime Minister in Nepal. There's a reason why that the best things are happening because of young people. That's because young people are utopian. So I completely disagree to what you said, that a person who's 21 or 22 is not utopian in their worldview. In fact, the more the white hair, in my case, your case and everybody's case, the more the white hair, the lesser the utopia, lesser the desire to unite the world, the lesser to do
not arguing with that at all.
Correct.
I am just saying.
But you said that the entire premise is that they're looking for their own security, own benefits,
I am saying that everybody is looking to maximize their own happiness. To your point, the definition of
at 18, 19, 20, 21, they aren't. At 18, 19, 20, 21, they're looking at situationships and nanoships and relationships.
You look at the number of people applying for UPSC exams. I don't think every one of them is trying to change the world. A lot of it is also, a guaranteed, secure life.
Families.
Right?
But they're doing UPSC because they want a better
UPSC.
world. Because they want a better world. Otherwise, there are different ways. A UPSC job.
I don't think you can. That's not broad strokes. You can't paint everybody with the same brush. For a lot of them who are coming from, perhaps, poverty in some cases. For them and for their parents, cracking that exam and becoming a collector in a small village is A, social respect, B, guaranteed, job security for the rest of your life.
That job security for now, because of the internet, thanks to what you all mentioned, is so democratized that a person who's a social media influencer earns much more than a UPSC aspirant. See, the days have gone by where a kid who is, in fact, now the utopia, if it exists, and if you concur to that viewpoint saying that, the kids are utopian in nature, they have a worldview which is idealistic, it's less pragmatic and more idealism that they function on. For a 16-year-old today who's also my house help's son, example, he has a choice of taking a phone, making videos and earning more from YouTube in comparison to doing UPSC. So today, if he's doing UPSC, I would like to believe, in comparison to 20 years ago, where this did not exist, today if he's doing UPSC, it is saying, भाई मुझे देश की प्रगति चाहिए या फिर दुनिया बेहतर चाहिए, उसके लिए मैं यूपीएससी कर रहा हूँ, नॉट बिकॉज आई वांट अ जॉब, बिकॉज एट द एंड ऑफ द डे इफ दे वांट अ जॉब टुडे टू अर्न मनी इज much more easier than 20 years ago, thanks to liberalization, thanks
So
to
the parents who are
If
pushing
you,
their kids
I,
to, study for UPSC and crack that exam, they probably have that poverty eradication mindset, right? They have lived in a different era. So they're pushing their kids who are 16, 18, 20 to study for that. Not always because desh ki tarakki chahiye. Maybe there's an element of that. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, right? So there's probably an
both are
element of that.
true.
I'm not saying they
Both are
purely
true.
want, both can be, two things can be true at the
Yeah.
same time. But a lot of it, I would also argue, is towards job security and also for them, social standing in their tier 2, tier 3 town where collect some of these guys, babus in these small, villages and even actually in Mumbai, they command a lot of respect and a lot of perks as well, right?
Correct, of course.
And there's an opportunity to live a very comfortable life. But yeah, look, that can go on and on. But I want to.
India, in my
Yeah.
thing, is divided into 3 parts.
Yeah.
There's a top 10% that essentially controls,
There's a top 1% as well, and the 0.1% as
or
well.
0.1, that's
Yeah.
even worse, but the top 10% of the country controls 97% of all resources in some form or
Sure.
the other. The remaining 60% of the country is essentially 60 to 70% of the country
Right.
is the middle class that you're talking about, or the upper middle class that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then you've got a 200 million, which essentially for whom this conversation is not going to reach the,
No, that's fair. That's fair.
So, no, but
Yeah.
when you're talking about the 200, this 200 million तो need to be lifted out of poverty. They need basic roti kapda makan. तो उन लोगों के लिए तो the job security definitely applies.
That's a different
but बाकी,
game.
correct. So that is what I'm saying. For the remaining, it's not job security anymore. It is about, in fact, job security might have been perhaps 20 years ago. Today, for the middle class and the upper middle class and the rich and the privileged, in my opinion, it is more about the fact that, look, if I'm doing something, I'm passionate about it. If I'm not passionate about it, वो करना नहीं है. And that is in fact a problem today.
Passion also comes from privilege in many ways. People are able to pursue their passion because it's coming from a place of privilege. Not everyone, our parents probably didn't, have the opportunity to just pursue passion because you had mouths to feed.
Jobs actually, and CII and your data basically now will validate, because when I'm called to your forums to speak, it is basically saying Gen Z is so the maximum attrition rate in your big multinational, Indian multinational, global multinationals is in Gen Z because they are so passionate about what they do. So, and they have such a, in fact,
I would say,
that
what,
is-
go to use a Gen Z term, 6-7. But the fact is that part of it is about passion, for sure. I don't disagree with that. Part of this is just saying that I don't know what I want to do. I want to try different things.
Yeah.
And this comes from privilege, because when you have to
And this
support yourself from your job, whatever that might be it in Bombay, be it in wherever, you do not have the opportunity to make that choice to say, I will be passionate and I want to follow blah, blah, blah. That
But how is a
conversation
middle
very
class
different.
boy? How is a middle class boy doing this?
A middle class boy, and I have
Hmm.
people who work in our company, and I see a lot of people who work in a lot of companies because that's what I do for a living, is very much focused
On his job?
on doing what they have chosen to do.
But why is the attrition there then? Because your working class is your middle class and upper middle class only. So why is the attrition taking place?
Attrition is there because you're still trying to better your life. You're trying to get a better job. You're trying to get more money. You're trying to get something else which might make you happier, which may still be defined in the construct of a job, not necessarily.
Now,
changing
something
the
that will
world
make a lot of
today.
people happy, and I want to pull this conversation back to education.
Yes,
One
yes,
second, you
yeah.
will have a point, you'll have a take on this as well, right? The gap year. Now, the idea of a gap year exists in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, not as much in the US,
Less so, yeah.
right? When I've gone backpacking, I've met plenty of kids who at the age of 18 are taking a year off. That conversation is not happening here, right? Here it's like, beta, aapka ek saal waste ho jayega, career bigad jayega. But, recently, this is October 2024, so about a year and a half ago, Australia opened up 1,000 working holiday visas for Indians, right? And within 2 weeks, 40,000 odd people applied. So 1,000, demand 40,000, supply 1,000, right? So there's a demand supply gap there. So why are Indians afraid of the pause? A, And is that changing? And you'll have a view on that. Both of you guys will have a view on that. And what's your answer? I mean, that could be another example of getting international exposure, right? A working holiday visa.
I'll jump into this
Yeah.
for a second.
Yeah.
The question to ask is if there are 40,000 people who want to do this working
Small
holiday,
numbers. Yeah.
it's a reasonable number, and the fact is that maybe the gap year is not as unpopular as you made it out to be.
Yeah.
Second piece is that are people using this as a way to get to Australia
Yeah.
in whatever form,
Yeah.
and then to see whether they can hustle their way into life if they like it, if they don't, whatever it is
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Yeah.
So what might be positioned as a gap, and I'm a big fan of gap year. Because of the whole life experience thing that we're talking about.
Yes.
I haven't been to Antarctica. I have been to Chile. I haven't been backpacking, but I have spent 2 weeks in Cuba at the time when it was still.
Fidel Castro.
I'm not that old, but
No, it's an opportunity to
but
get that
it's-
international exposure without having to spend that hefty degree, a hefty sum of money.
it's
and
it's
you get that international
it's no,
experience.
it's not that. It's an opportunity, of course, to do all of that. It is an opportunity to step out of whatever world you're in. Let's say you're studying to be a microbiologist, and this is where you're going to make your impact. This is where you're going to live your life, right? You get this year, 2 years, half a year, whatever it is, to step back from that before you start your so-called real life.
Yeah.
To travel, to gain experiences, to round yourself up as a person, to earn a little bit of money on the go. A lot of the gap year kids are working as they go. A lot of the gap year kids from the UK are working in Jaipur in NGOs, or they're working in wherever they're doing stuff.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure themselves out in a very Gen Z way. The gap year allows you to do that. The gap year also allows you to do some of the projects that you were describing earlier, to say, let me go to Bihar and work in the villages and see what I'm going to do. It's equally about that.
It's
It
brilliant.
allows you to experiment.
And the Indian
And do
education
stuff.
system doesn't really offer that.
No education system is giving you that level of opportunity. You
Right.
can go and do a semester at sea, and you can go and do an exchange.
But here
program,
it's frowned
XYZ.
upon, right? If as a headhunter, I mean, I know you
no,
recruit for
because,
seniors.
like I said, in high privilege, this is not frowned upon. It's encouraged. Perhaps today it's changing. In many situations where your main aim is to get a job, start earning, start your life, start your family, whatever the traditional construct of how you ought to be living your life is, then it's a waste because you're losing out in the rat race. Indians, for example, are obsessed with batch.
Yeah.
I can't report to a batch, whatever guy, what have you. This is changing. I could see you jumping up. It is changing. But when people were recruiting back in the day, in the 90s and even in the early 2000s, it was like, what batch MBA is he? What batch HR, has he done?
Right.
Because that is how career growth or progression was.
So that is a pure
So
issue as well.
You
right?
lose out because then your batchmates,
Yeah.
and look, it's a
Are
much
ahead.
wider issue, because you can
There's peer
say,
pressure.
I'll bring something else into it, which is not the gambit of this conversation, but women take time off for parenting.
Yeah.
A big issue about coming back is that when they're ready 5 years later or 2 years later to come back into the workforce, their batchmates or their peer group has moved on. They're also, and the construct in the company or the environment or whatever it is has changed. Their ability to glide back in at the same level or to whatever they think they're worth is not there. And that path back in is difficult. It's not the conversation today. But it's the same. It's a mindset in terms of being able to, where you start and how you.
When
measure
an
yourself
Indian
in the race.
recruiter looks at a resume or a CV and sees that a student has taken a gap year, is that viewed upon favorably, or is that viewed upon as someone who's not serious?
It's not an issue at all. It's not an issue
in
at all.
India.
Look, if you were doing an entry-level job, your best chance to get a good entry-level job in a reputed company, whatever that might be, is through campus placement.
Yes.
If you're taking a gap year, that is cut off for you. So that's a different conversation. I don't work at that level. I don't see that. I deal with experienced hires. And even early in my career, I was still dealing with experienced hires who had maybe 5 years of experience. Now it's 15 or 20.
Right.
Increasingly, people are looking for holistic experiences and a view of the world, of India, of whatever market you seek to seek to serve. You're solving a problem.
The issue with quickly in this is that I concur with most of what you said, and that's a pleasant change.
But I'm going to hear about what you didn't concur with. Go for it.
To agree and to support, I think everybody is there to give a different perspective is what is
For
important.
sure.
What you mentioned in terms of first the concurring part, so that is where you mentioned that it is very important for people to take a gap year. I do completely agree. Also, in high privilege, it is not frowned upon. But when it comes to middle class, it's the rat race, and the
Yes.
mentality has to change. If the mentality changes, gap year will be the answer in many ways to an education system that is not being able to fix itself quickly. And that gap year will give a lot of holistic experiences per se.
For
So
sure.
I think gap year question is a great one. And I really hope there are more people who essentially go on a gap year, whether it is to go to Australia or whether it is to go to Andhra Pradesh. The idea essentially is to be able to experience life in its fullest and then to be able to choose what you want to do eventually.
Right. I think that's a great
Yeah,
note
and
to
absolutely.
That's a great note to kind of end this on, because I know we can go on and on. But before we wrap up, I want to just, we have a segment called Plush Off the Cuff. It's just our version of rapid fire. So let's start with the first one, and both of you can chime in. The biggest failure of the Indian education system.
It doesn't teach you how to think today.
There are no schools and colleges.
What do you mean?
We don't have enough number of schools and colleges in order to serve the population today, and not enough good quality schools and colleges in our country to serve the population.
And I agree.
Awesome. For a change.
No, I agree with a lot of what he said.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's stuff outside of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Your biggest learning in a university setting, but outside a classroom.
Holistic development of the personality.
In the community kitchen, trying to figure out who the hell was eating what and who was drinking what. So,
Okay. Go to a top tier university overseas, or start your own company with that seed capital.
Start your own company with the seed capital. My answer is simple.
the choices we have, it depends on what you want to do. So my father sat me down when I was about 15 or 16 and said, proposals have started coming. Do you want to go down that route? Calcutta is where you recruit Marwari brides, right?
Yeah.
And he said, "Aapko wo sab karna hai, or you want to study?" And he, of course, by study, he meant CA or engineering. There was nothing else. I said, no, I want to study. You're 15. Who the hell wants to go through this thing? So he said, "Okay, so your Dahej is going to your education since you have chosen to study." So my Dahej went to London Business School.
Okay.
So
Good choice. Yeah. Okay. And overrated and underrated country for top tier education.
Overrated is United States of America.
Okay.
And underrated perhaps would be Germany.
I don't have a view on this. I don't think the US is overrated. I don't think it's the only option, for sure. I think not a country, but I think Europe is a great opportunity for a lot of people.
Can I change the last answer? An underrated country. Okay, so overrated would be United States of America.
Yeah.
An underrated country to study and experience life in its fullest, India.
I was surprised you didn't say India earlier, given how passionate you are about India.
Yeah, that's why I thought that it's better. You said country, so I thought automatically of beyond the country.
Okay. So, the next question: a career or education path of a person you admire or envy.
I'm going to go with my profession. It's underrated. And my father was the first professional executive recruiter in the country, in a sense. I think, and when I recruit people into my company, I say, you actually do have the opportunity to change the world, which is not by policy.
Yeah.
It is by changing the course of somebody's life, by helping them find or pointing them towards that opportunity. And it is potentially changing the fortunes of a company, particularly at leadership level, if you help them hire the right people. I think it has tremendous impact. It's not considered it's not something that people wake up to say that they want to do.
Yeah.
So the person I would admire is my dad, because he set up the profession in the country and spawned a lot of other companies. And I think it's underrated, and we have a lot of impact. We do go to bed feeling the good tired.
Yeah. What about you, Rishabh?
Just I think one person who I greatly admire in terms of his education journey, because this is a conversation about people going abroad and studying, and then, in my opinion, coming back and doing things for the country. Um, One person who's currently the chairperson of the Godrej group of companies and also part of our advisory board at I.I.M.U.N, Nadir Godrej.
Yeah.
He studied at IIT Bombay, but then went to MIT, to Stanford, and to Harvard, if I'm not wrong. So he finished all of this, and he's traveled across the world, picked up experiences, but also traveled across the length and the breadth of the country, picked up experiences, and then given back beautifully, as the Godrejes do, to building India that is Bharat.
Great answer. And I have a bonus question here, and I want to end on this one. Is the last book that you read that changed the way you think?
Life of a Yogi.
Mine's really coming from perhaps my age and stage of life and that of my parents. But the last book that really profoundly impacted me in that way, life-changing way, was Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. End of Life Choices.
Interesting, both books authored by Indians, right? And I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you guys so much. It's been a fantastic conversation. And although there's no hamper to be won here, we do have
Karan.
our Plush gift set. It's
Thanks so
for
much, sir.
Thank
very
you.
much.
it's our brand Plush, and it's
Thank you.
for upwardly mobile professionals like yourselves. So hope you guys enjoy
Now
it.
upward is only going to be in one direction.
No, and thank you so much. You know, I felt I would speak a lot more, but I didn't need to because there was so much
You were just
natural
refereeing.
tension
Yes,
and
there you
disagreement
go.
between.
No,
both
like I
you
said,
and-
we were agreeing on a lot of things, but I was just saying that it's.
Yeah.
I don't disagree
On-
with
on
almost
that note-
anything you said.
on that
Except,
note,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, we haven't
yeah,
yet wound
yeah,
up.
yeah.
I thought we had.
It's, yeah, thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for coming on board, and really enjoyed this conversation. And I think this conversation, you know, whether you're 16 or 60, this is going to be relevant for you, and look forward to really pushing
Well,
this
thank
out.
you for doing this.
Thank
And
you
that's
so much.
fun. The last thing that I would say on camera
Yeah.
is that I've tried to give as many Western anecdotes as one can possibly in order to validate the fact that yes, there is one that one can learn from both the West and the East.
For sure.
But at the same point in time, there are alternative routes that exist, which is what we all agree to. So thank you for having me.
Sure.
Thank you for listening to these very strong points of view.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you guys
Superb.
so much.
Thank you.